Welcome back to the Creatively Curious podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walter. This week's episode, I'll be going over week 8 of the Creative Visionary program, which is on texture. So, this was a super fun week where we got to play with different things and different materials, different ways of applying the paint, scraping away the paint, and things like that. And I remember last year when I took the course for the first time, I just loved this section. And so I use a lot of the texture in my art, which I'm not sure how much texture is too much texture, but someone may or may not tell me. I guess if things don't sell, then maybe it's too much texture. But the takeaways from this week are play and experiment with texture to learn and remember. So just again, taking it back to the play week and pretty much always every time that we're doing something creative, hopefully there's an element of play and a big element of play there because um things have happened for me in my little sketchbook that were kind of accidents. And that's the nice thing about having a sketchbook is it is pretty much all play there. And then you discover things that work and that you really love, and you discover things that you don't like and that didn't work. And so it's really important to just have that place where you can go to be totally free and play. And then hopefully that can translate then into pieces, bigger pieces, canvases, the panel boards that we're working on, that you still are able to have that element of play, which sometimes can be a challenge, especially if, maybe you're getting ready for pieces to sell. So just and with the texture, that's all we were doing this week, is just trying different things, playing, experimenting, so that we can feel free, and then we'll remember the things that we like and that feel good to us. So thick paint is a beautiful contrast with thin paint. Nick is always pushing doing thick paint. And then this week they talked about glazing. So that's using a thinner paint. So paint mixed with water, where a lot of the time actually I end up mixing it with a gloss medium. Subtractive processes create areas of transparency. So scraping and sanding away things will create areas of transparency. So these are still the takeaways. Layering creates depth, surface, and color richness. So layering can create transparency and color harmony. So if you're doing like a glaze, then that's a way of creating that color harmony. But just having layers and layers is actually just really freeing, because I, I up until this course, I didn't realize that just the effect that it has when you have different layers, and then you can sand away or scrape into the layer and then see the top layer and then see the layer underneath. And it just creates such a richness on the canvas that is really hard to replicate if you're not doing those layers. And so sometimes the feeling is like, oh, am I going to make a mistake? Am I going to mess it up? But you really can't mess it up. There's no messing it up, because you can just, I mean, this is talking about paint and acrylic paint, but you just add another layer. Like there is no error. And like that's such a good metaphor for life too. Is like sometimes we think, oh, I made that mistake, or I made this wrong turn, or I did this thing, but it's like, no, nothing's really a mistake, because you generally will learn from that and you move on, and you wouldn't be the person that you are if you hadn't gone through those experiences. So same thing applies to the canvas. And the fifth takeaway is spontaneity is created by using tools you can't control, and that's brings us freshness to the canvas. So um, I'll just talk a little bit about some of the tools that I like to use. And that's kind of like the main takeaways for this week. And then it was just kind of have fun and experiment. So what are some of the things? So one thing that was new for me last year was this idea of sanding. Now, I've done that a lot on the wood panels, which works pretty well. And you can use things that are pretty hard. So this is like a wire brush. Sorry for people who are just listening to this, but I'll try to describe it the best I can. But also, I post these to YouTube just in case anyone wants to look at them. So wire brush has been pretty interesting. And then I have a bigger wire brush that I'll use, and I can get pretty aggressive with that with the wood panels. I'm a little bit more mindful of the canvas not to go too, I guess, to just press too hard because I don't want to ruin the canvas. And I know some people, I haven't been brave enough yet, but I should. It's my experimentation week to use like an actual electric sander. Again, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable doing that on a canvas, but on the wood, sure, no problem. So maybe I'll do that. I have a piece that I was working on that I can think about that with. And then, of course, sandpaper, different grits of the sandpaper. Something really coarse will take the paint off more quickly, something really fine will take it off more gently. And I also love, love, love that. Love sanding. I love how it makes me feel. I love how it looks on the canvas or the wood panel. It's really amazing. These lovely stir sticks that you get when you buy a can of paint from a paint store. Love these too. So just using the end for mark making, dipping it into the paint and then pressing that onto whatever surface you're using. Maybe the long end, using this to scrape away with. Using, instead of a brush, using like a foam, what are these called? Foam brush, I guess. So it's like foam, so it's really smooth and goes on more smoothly, and they have them in different widths. So that can be kind of fun. And one thing I really embraced was scraping into the paint. So if I have layers underneath and then I put on like a thicker layer of paint, then I scrape into that with different marks. So circles, or sometimes I do things that kind of look like leaves, or it doesn't matter. You can just do lines. It doesn't really doesn't matter. And I love that too. And depending on the brush, it leaves like a different mark, depending, I guess, on the end of the brush. Using like different palette knives to put the paint on, which I think there's people that just paint with palette knives, but I typically have been painting with brushes. I think this was in my kids' some sort of a toy or game that they got. So it's just a square piece of styrofoam, but it's really thick, and I just use it like a stamp basically. So just it's put it in the paint and then stamp it onto whatever I'm painting on. And actually, I did end up using it because, again, the thing I was working on had a really thick paint. So I almost used it to kind of remove the paint. So it left squares, but not of like a different color. It just kind of took the paint away. So that was pretty cool. And I think I talked about this in a different, maybe it was in a play episode, but there's this meshy styrofoam that comes around uh and what are they, apple pears, I call them. So it's connected like a cylinder, and then I end up cutting it, and then I put the paint on it and then use it like a stamp too, and it's really, really pretty. It's a really neat design. So there's that bubble wrap. This big bubble wrap was in the bottom of, currently they have hydroponic strawberries at Costco. I don't know if anyone's seen those, but they're all the rage right now. But so this bubble wrap on the bottom, love this. So applying the paint to the bubbly part of the bubble wrap and then just pressing that on whatever you're working on. I mean, there really, it's endless what you could use. You could even just, this is like a Lego wheel. You could roll that in the paint and then wheel that onto whatever it is you're working on. Any sort of fruit cups or caps to anything can make a really nice circle. Like, different ways to make lines, pencils, crayons, Stabilos I haven't used, so that's kind of on my on my goal list, which is like a water soluble crayon, which would work really well with acrylic paint. And Nick says that he uses, I think, yeah, he did. He went over a demonstration that was wax crayons, and I believe he says he uses some oil and then, covering that with paint, and then you can let the paint dry and scraping the paint away that was on the oil because the acrylic paint won't stick very well to the oil. Now, I haven't tried this. It makes me a little bit nervous because then the paint is unstable there, but then he's saying that then when you seal it with a gloss medium, then it should be good to go for anything else on top, which is pretty cool. But it's why I kind of wanted to try the water soluble ones first and then maybe branch out to that because I don't want to ruin anything that I'm working on. But I could try it on my play panels, my, throwaway boards, because it wouldn't really matter there. So, um, let's see, is there anything else? So use texture. This is maybe where I struggle. Use texture as a complement, as a difference to something else. So if you have texture, something that's really textured, and then you put it next to a smooth surface, that's amazing because it's a difference. You have smooth and then you have texture. Now I'm struggling a little bit because I love the texture. So I feel like I have a lot of texture next to texture. So we'll see. Something I'm working on. Um, let's see. Yeah, you can get better at being spontaneous and letting go of control. And one thing that I'm gonna try to replicate in like maybe on a canvas, and something I haven't tried as well is adding pigments to my paints to make it thicker, or adding something, which I'll discover maybe at the art store, to my paints to make it thicker so that I'm not just adding, regular kind of consistency paint, but it's like a thicker paint that maybe then won't go on as smoothly. So then I'll put it on with some sort of trowel or maybe one of these palette knives, something like that. Because in my art journal, I had like an old paint that was in a container that I was basically trying to use up in here. And I just scraped it onto the page and I just loved how it felt being thicker and then scraping into it some lines and circles. And then I used that styrofoam tool to make squares kind of across the page. And I just thought it would be fun to try that on a canvas, like on a bigger scale, and mixing the paint deliberately to be thicker like that. So wish me luck with that. And I think that's it for this week. Um, oh, and then yeah, there's other things like guides. Nicholas always uses different guides to make like a smooth, clean edge. So I picked one up from Home Depot, and then he uses like a flat trowel, which I don't know what that, I guess that might be used for like plastering or some home building activity. He uses it a lot in his painting, and I haven't used that. I couldn't find one at Home Depot when I checked. So maybe like a specialty paint store. But that's something I'd be curious about trying as well, as a way of applying paint and smoothing out the paint. And I use, oh, my favorite tool I forgot to bring with me while I'm recording, but is a silicone wedge tool. And I use that a lot. So I kind of use that similar, I guess, to a trowel. So I mean, again, the possibilities are endless, and it's just really fun to use different things other than paintbrushes. I feel a bit constrained by a paintbrush, if I'm being perfectly honest, and I don't even know why that is, but so then it is freeing to use other things, and you kind of don't know what will happen when you try them, and like things are happy little accidents. I think that was who was that? That painter with the big hair. Um, he used to say that a lot, and happy little accidents, which is the whole point, is just to keep trying different things and challenging yourself, but also having fun. So I hope this was helpful to you and interesting, and I will see you on the next episode. And until next time, know that you are a work of art. Take care.